In a quiet, unassuming neighborhood, nestled between rows of identical houses, lived a young boy named Thomas. His house sat on the corner, slightly removed from the bustle of the street, with its weathered exterior and overgrown lawn, a stark contrast to the pristine homes around it. Thomas, though only 8, felt the weight of solitude like a heavy blanket draped over his small shoulders. His days were long, filled with the silence of an empty house and the distant echoes of laughter that came from outside. His room, small and cluttered with forgotten toys, had one redeeming feature: a large, wide window that looked out onto the street. This window became Thomas's world. Every day, he would press his face against the cool glass, watching the neighborhood children play together, running, laughing, and living in a world that seemed so far out of reach. They chased each other with unbridled joy, their carefree energy filling the air as they played hide and seek, rode bikes, and told jokes that echoed down the street. Thomas watched them all with a quiet longing, his small hands leaving smudges on the window pane as he leaned in closer, hoping, wishing, dreaming. In his mind, he would imagine being part of their games, running alongside them, his laughter mingling with theirs. But that world remained behind the glass, always just out of reach. He wasn't like the other children. He was quiet, shy, and the neighborhood kids barely noticed him. When they did, they'd whisper or look away, their curiosity fleeting, as if sensing something different about him. Each day after school, the pattern was the same. He would rush to his window, his heart filled with a sliver of hope, waiting for someone to notice him. Maybe today, he thought, they would invite him to play. Maybe today, they would knock on his door and ask him to join their games. But the knock never came. Autumn arrived, painting the trees in brilliant shades of red and gold. The crisp air made the children's laughter sharper, more vivid. They bundled up in coats and scarves, but their games never ceased. One day, as Thomas watched, a small group of kids gathered near the tree across the street, their faces filled with excitement. They were building a fort, gathering sticks and leaves, laughing as they created a secret world beneath the branches. Thomas's heart ached with longing as he watched them, his face pressed so close to the glass that his breath fogged up the window. His mother, a tired woman worn down by the struggles of single parenthood, would sometimes find him there, staring out of that window. She would sigh, ruffle his hair, and tell him to go outside, but the thought of stepping into that world, uninvited and unnoticed, was too much for him. He was afraid of the rejection that always seemed to hang in the air like a cloud. Weeks passed, and the leaves began to fall. The children's games continued, but Thomas's hope had started to wane. He still watched, but the dreams of being included began to fade, replaced by a quiet acceptance of his place behind the glass. His loneliness deepened, a hollow ache that he carried with him everywhere. One cold, gray afternoon, Thomas noticed something different. Among the group of children, there was a new face, a girl with a bright red scarf and a smile that seemed to light up the dreary day. She laughed loudly, her voice carrying across the street, and for the first time in weeks, Thomas felt a spark of curiosity. She was new, like him. Maybe she didn't know about the invisible barrier that kept him on the outside looking in. For days he watched her, always from the safety of his window. She seemed different from the others, more open, more welcoming. She played with everyone, her laughter infectious, and yet she never seemed to notice Thomas watching from behind the glass. His heart ached as he realized that even the new girl was part of a world he couldn't enter. But then, one day, something changed. It was late in the afternoon, the sky tinged with the fading light of sunset. The children were playing tag, their breath visible in the cool air. Thomas, as usual, watched from his window. His gaze was fixed on the girl with the red scarf, her movements graceful as she dodged the others. And then, suddenly, she stopped. She turned her head, her eyes scanning the houses, and for the briefest of moments, her gaze met Thomas's. He froze, his heart pounding in his chest. She had seen him. She was looking directly at him. For a moment, time seemed to stop. The other children continued their game, oblivious to the silent exchange between the boy in the window and the girl with the red scarf. Thomas held his breath, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and hope. Would she wave? Would she smile? Would she cross the street, walk up to his door, and ask him to play? But the moment passed. The girl broke eye contact, turning back to the game as if nothing had happened. Thomas's heart sank. The fragile hope that had briefly flickered in his chest was extinguished. That night, as Thomas lay in bed, he couldn't stop thinking about the moment they had shared. Had she really seen him, or had it been his imagination? The next day, he returned to his window, waiting for her to look again, but she never did. The days grew shorter, the air colder, and soon, the children stopped playing outside altogether as winter settled in. The window, once a portal to the world he longed to join, became a reminder of what he could never have. Thomas still watched, but there was no one left to see. Snow fell, blanketing the street in silence, and the only movement came from the occasional car passing by. Years passed, and Thomas grew older, but the loneliness never left him. The window remained his constant companion, a silent witness to the life he watched, but never lived. And though he no longer pressed his face to the glass, his heart still ached with the same unfulfilled longing. The knock on the door never came.